Bloomberg Audio Studios. Podcasts, radio, news.
This is the Bloomberg Daybreak, your podcast. Good morning. It's Tuesday, the 11th of November. I'm Caroline Hepker in London.
And I'm Stephen Carroll in Brussels. Coming up today, the European Union looks at ways to ban Chinese giants Huawei and ZTE from its telecoms networks.
Bloomberg learns that Switzerland is close to securing a deal that will slash US tariffs from 39% to 15%.
Plus, sun, sea and surging property prices. Why Dubai's unbuilt penthouses are sparking a bidding war among the ultra-rich.
Let's start with a roundup of our top stories.
Exclusive reporting from Bloomberg has found that the European Union is considering ways to compel member states to ban Chinese telecom giants from their networks. Sources tell us the European Commission is exploring measures that would make it legally binding for nations to phase out technology from Huawei and ZTE. With more, here's Bloomberg's Chris Pitt.
While countries such as the UK and Sweden banned Chinese vendors from their networks years ago, others, including Spain and Greece, continue to allow them. But as trade and political ties with the EU's second largest trading partner grow increasingly strained, Brussels is becoming more concerned about the security risks posed by Chinese telecoms equipment makers. Since 2020, the EU has recommended member countries don't use high-risk suppliers. Now we're told the Commission wants to make that a legally binding requirement. Sources also told us the EU's executive branch is considering measures to dissuade countries outside the bloc from relying on Chinese telecom vendors. Huawei didn't immediately respond to requests for comment. However, China's foreign ministry has previously criticised the EU's characterisation of Huawei and ZTE as high-risk suppliers, calling it lacking in both legal and factual basis. In London, Chris Pitt, Bloomberg Radio.
Switzerland is close to securing a 15% tariff on its exports to the US, according to sources who've spoken to Bloomberg. The deal would be a relief for the country after it was hit with a punishing 39% tariff rate in August. It's understood that a deal may be concluded within the next 2 weeks, with US President Trump confirming that his administration is, quote, working on a deal to get their tariffs a little bit lower. The possible breakthrough comes after some of Switzerland's most high-profile business executives attended an Oval Office meeting last week that prompted the US president to endorse additional trade negotiations.
The longest US government shutdown in history could soon come to an end after the Senate passed a stopgap funding bill backed by a group of 8 Democrats. Senate Majority Leader John Thune welcomed the move.
Mr. President, I said that we will be voting on the final package in the very near future, and I'm hoping that will be hours and not days. We're on the 41st day of this shutdown. Nutrition benefits are in jeopardy. Air travel is an extremely precarious situation. Our staffs and many other government workers have been working for nearly 6 weeks without pay.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune speaking there. The Republican-controlled House is expected to vote on the bill tomorrow, which will keep most of the government open until the end of January. However, it could take days for air travel to return to normal and for 42 million low-income Americans to receive delayed food assistance benefits.
The UK's Chancellor Rachel Reeves has given the strongest indication yet that her upcoming budget could break the government's pre-election promise not to raise taxes. Before it came to power last year, the Labour Party made a manifesto commitment not to lift the rates of income tax, national insurance or VAT. However, speaking to BBC Radio, Reeves suggested the context has changed.
The economic circumstances have deteriorated since a year ago because of those conflicts, because of those trade barriers. And as a result, we are having to look at taxes and spending. And it's got to be both of those things. And the speech I made last week was about setting the context for the budget, which is a difficult one.
Senior Labour figures, including the party's deputy leader Lucy Powell and Culture Secretary Lisa Nandy, have said they don't think the government should break the tax pledge. It comes also as the British Retail Consortium announced that weakening UK sales growth in October. Shoppers held back on purchases ahead of the budget, which also happens to fall 2 days before Black Friday.
The BBC has just days to decide how it will respond to US President Donald Trump's threat to sue the corporation for $1 billion. The move comes as the BBC conceded that edits made to Trump's speech on the 6th of January 2021 for a documentary wrongly gave the impression of a direct call for violent action. In a letter dated Sunday, Trump threatened legal action and sought damages if the BBC did not issue an apology, retract the documentary and compensate him appropriately for the harm caused. Here's the BBC's chairman, Samir Shah.
We have received communication from President Trump and his people, and we are at the moment considering how to reply to him.
Has he said that he's going to be suing the BBC?
I do not know that yet, but he's a litigious fellow, so we should be prepared for all outcomes.
Samir Shah speaking there following the resignations of BBC Director General Tim Davie and News Chief Deborah Turnus, who both stepped down over the matter on Sunday.
Now, Warren Buffett says he's going quiet and picking up the pace of his charitable donations. It marks the end of an era for the billionaire investor, who will also stop writing Berkshire Hathaway's annual letters and speaking at its meetings. The 95-year-old is stepping down from his CEO role at the firm this year, passing the reins to longtime deputy Greg Abel. In a memo detailing the change, Warren Buffett disclosed plans to donate more than $1.3 billion to 4 family foundations. And those are our top stories for you this morning. In terms of the markets, well, we were risk on yesterday because the US government shutdown looks perhaps to be coming to a close with a vote expected on Wednesday. The Nasdaq gained 2.3% on Monday, its best day since May. The US stocks 600 closed 1.4% higher, also rising the most in 6 months. And European futures are edging higher, but actually Asian stocks are down. The Kospi, for example, wiped out a gain that we saw earlier of 2.8%. Gold, though, is still up 0.3%, although Bitcoin has given up gains. It's down now 0.5%. And there's still a big debate about how much asset prices were really looking at the shutdown in any case, but that's where we are in the markets.
In a moment, we'll bring you more on the EU's push against Chinese telecom equipment firms, plus why unbuilt penthouses in Dubai are sparking a bidding spree among the ultra-rich. But another story that I wanted to mention this morning: can influencers help to make Microsoft Copilot cool? This is something that our colleague Emily Forgash has been writing about. Microsoft has hired influencers to try and bring mainly younger users to Copilot, because in terms of the numbers using AI assistants, they're lagging way behind the likes of ChatGPT or Gemini, even though, of course, Microsoft has this huge advantage in the corporate world because of the software that's on most business PCs as well. It's an interesting strategy. I'm not sure covering all matters of things.
Yeah, look, this is where my experience as a parent has alarm bells ringing. Am I really cooler to the kids if I cling to a new friend or new clothes or new music? I'd say yes and no.
Depends on who they are, really, yes. I suppose. I mean, some of the examples they've used, so there's one influencer called Alex Earle, who's from New Jersey, who she has, she's one of these pilots. She's been using Copilot to try and brainstorm ideas. Apparently, she asked it how she could appear younger, because some of her followers have said she looks 40. She's in her mid-20s. They told her to focus on a good skincare regime. Okay, fine. I'm just not sure that necessarily any of these messages are really going to win anyone over to it, but some of the responses on social media have been pretty positive to it. Will this be enough to win people over? Does AI need any more marketing than it already gets?
Yeah, but look, I think it just goes to show the Chat GPT numbers that hundreds of millions of users every single week are using it so intensively. It's really hard and a massive challenge for anyone else to keep up. But yes, lots of question marks about how to make your brand the cool one that people want to use.
Indeed, one to follow. Well, let's bring you more on our top story now. The European Union is exploring ways to force member states to phase out technology from Chinese firms Huawei and ZTE. This is trade tensions have risen between Brussels and Beijing. Our reporter Mikhail Kabala joins me now for more on this story. Mikhail, what exactly is the European Commission planning?
It seems to be planning more steps towards tightening control over who can be a part of your critical infrastructure. Sources are telling us the EU's executive branch is exploring new rules that would turn its current recommendations on what are seen as high-risk telecom vendors into a legal requirement. The move could force member states to phase out Chinese giants Huawei and ZTE from their telecommunication networks. So far, countries could choose whether to follow a Brussels 2020 security toolbox. But now we understand that top EU officials are weighing proposals that would compel the countries to align with the recommendations. Say, if they become legally binding, member states that wouldn't comply could face infringement or financial penalties.
Why are they doing this? And I suppose the question, why are they doing this now?
The primary concern here seems to be security. So as trade and political ties with China are now becoming increasingly strained, the bloc is more concerned about risks posed by Chinese telecoms, especially that companies with close ties to Beijing could gain access to sensitive data and sensitive network system. It is an issue that has been simmering since the first Donald Trump administration. Trump has been pushing for this Huawei ban back in 2019, and outside the EU, the UK has banned Chinese vendors. Within the EU, Sweden has done so, but others like Spain and Greece still use them. And there are some in Brussels that argue that this uneven approach, now against the backdrop of these spats with China, the entire EU is exposed. So it does look like an attempt to have a single binding standard across the bloc.
What has China and these companies said about this?
We haven't yet received a comment. We've sent a request for comment to Huawei, haven't received a response. But we know that China's foreign ministry has previously criticized the EU's characterization of Huawei and ZTE as high-risk suppliers as something that lacks both a legal and factual basis.
Well, just lastly, I suppose you mentioned that this comes, at a time when there are tensions between the EU and China, and those have been rising, and there have been disputes about chip supplies and lots of other issues. But how significant is this then in actually the broader relationship?
It could be a significant step by the EU towards de-risking from China. This is something that Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has been talking about back in 2023, essentially bypassing regions that pose a security risk without, they say, decoupling from them, without severing the relationship outright. And it's interesting to add that this reporting comes almost on the back of another short spat with China that's surrounding Xperia. So the Dutch government took control of the Chinese-owned chip maker based in the Netherlands, and that led to a temporary halt in exports from China of chips. This has been resolved a few days back. Maybe looking at another area where the EU is really reliant on China. China has suspended its recent rare earth export curbs, which were imposed a few months back. As part of a trade truce with the United States, they suspended that curb. That appears to have benefited the EU as well. And all of this comes against the backdrop of on and off trade disputes between the US and China. The US would sometimes shift to a more confrontational, balancing stance, whereas the Brussels approach seems to be more about targeting specific vulnerabilities and steadily pushing towards that de-risking and reducing their critical dependencies.
Okay, well, a very interesting one to watch from here as well. Mikhail Kubala, thank you very much for bringing us up to date on that story. Stay with us. More from Bloomberg Daybreak Europe coming up after this.
Now, Dubai's property boom is reaching new heights with a surge in sales of luxury homes and apartments bought off plan. But some market watchers are starting to see parallels to the Emirates 2009 crash. Our Middle East real estate reporter Zainab Fattah joins us now this morning for more on this. Zainab, good morning. In your reporting, you use the example of one new development where potential buyers have bid the equivalent of more than $200,000 just to be considered for these multi-million-dollar apartments. What does this tell us about the state of the market where you are?
It's $270,000 to be exact, the equivalent of 1 million dirhams that you had to submit just to be considered. And that's money that had to be cashed and goes into the company's accounts. After they do the allocation, if you got an apartment, great, you do the rest of the payments. If you don't, then they give you your money back. It shows you how hot the market, especially on the very top end, the ultra luxury side of the market. And that's really a function of the increase in wealthy individuals who are moving to Dubai. As a phenomenon we started seeing after the pandemic hit and Dubai reopened much quicker than other cities. We started to see the wealthy and the rich and famous celebrities and many people moving into the city or coming to the city to see it, and then some decided to make it home. And Dubai responded by liberalizing their visa policies, giving 10-year visas to those who can afford it. And in many ways, that started that influx that we have right now that helped the market. And the 7-year property decline that really drove prices and rents down since 2014.
So how much worry is there then that this could lead to another bubble scenario? There are still fresh memories of the 2009 crash in the Emirates as well.
Yes, absolutely. No one forgets that in this city because it's seared into the memory of so many people. But there was a UBS report recently that said Dubai is starting to kind of enter into bubble territory. Still, the city, however, is behind Miami, Tokyo, Zurich, and Los Angeles on that index. So what's happening in Dubai, it's big, but the city is still much smaller than some of those cities, and in many ways the increases in values and rents have shocked a lot of people because of the pace of it. So Dubai property prices on average rose by 70% since the end of 2019, and rental growth have outpaced that. On the upper end of the market, we're talking about 145% increase because much of that supply catering to the ultra wealthy did not exist, and developers are really right now building it up.
I mean, when you talk about luxury, I just was struck by the numbers again in your piece. That is for properties that are of about $10 million or more. So it is very high end, isn't it? But what has changed in terms of trying to prevent another property bubble or crash like the one that you saw in 2009? Because authorities there have tried to put some additional kind of constraints and different measures. Tell us about those briefly.
A lot have changed, in fact, since that crash happened and the banks were saddled with so much debt. The government came in with so many different rules. So now we have escrow accounts. Now developers have to actually own outright the land they want to build the project on. It can't be mortgaged. And those who actually are allowed to buy are those who are buying a property that exists. You can't buy off-plan, the advanced model. You can't buy with a mortgage. So a lot of those are people putting their own cash and savings into it. There are certain things that the developers are instituting. So when you buy a property ahead of construction and you take the contract, you can't just make one payment and go resell it. A lot of developers lock you in until at least you paid 60% of it, or sometimes 50%, it depends. So there are a lot of guardrails. And the biggest of all, that when you want to get a mortgage in this town, you need to put 20% down payment. So there are no mortgages below that for first home buyers, and the second home buyers is 30%. So it's a market that is kind of concerned and shaped by the trauma it endured in 2009.
This is Bloomberg Daybreak Europe, your morning brief on the stories making news from London to Wall Street and beyond.
Look for us on your podcast feed every morning on Apple, Spotify and anywhere else you get your podcasts.
You can also listen live each morning on London DAB Radio, the Bloomberg Business app and Bloomberg.com.
Our flagship New York station is also available on your Amazon Alexa devices. Just say, Alexa, play Bloomberg 1130. I'm Caroline Hepker.
And I'm Stephen Carroll. Join us again tomorrow morning for all the news you need to start your day, right here on Bloomberg Daybreak Europe.